Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today. My name is Ariel Bradford, and I'm the spokesperson for the Civil Rights Division. For your awareness, we are recording this press conference.
Recording in progress.
To ensure that the ASL interpreter is accessible and visible, we ask that everyone who is not speaking to turn off their cameras and remain muted. Today, you will hear from Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clark of the Civil Rights Division. After her remarks, she will take a few questions. AAG Clark, the floor is yours.
My name is Kristen Clark, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Justice, and I am here today to announce the findings of the Justice Department Civil Rights investigation into the Phoenix Police Department and the City of Phoenix. Based on a comprehensive review, we find that there is reasonable cause to believe that the police department and the city engage in a pattern or practice of conduct that violates the First, Fourth, and 14th Amendments of the U.S. Constitution. We have also identified violations of the Safe Streets Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and the Americans with Disabilities Act. Specifically, we found that the Phoenix Police Department and the City of Phoenix engage in a pattern or practice of using excessive force, unlawfully detaining, ticketing, and arresting homeless people, discriminating against Black, Hispanic, and Indigenous people in its policing enforcement, violating the rights of people engaged in demonstrations and protests, and discriminating against people with behavioral health disabilities. First, we found that the Phoenix Police Department uses excessive force, often unreasonably escalating the level of force within the very first few minutes or even seconds of an encounter. This behavior includes improper use of tasers, projectiles, leg restraints, police dogs, and even deadly force, including guns and neck restraints and compression restraints. Officers also routinely delay medical aid and employ excessive force on wounded people. For example, Phoenix officers shot a man and after he fell, fired multiple projectiles at him and then sent a police canine to drag him back to them. The pain they inflicted was extraordinary, but for 9 minutes, officers failed to provide medical aid. Tragically, that man died. In addition, contrary to accepted practices throughout the nation, the Phoenix Police Department trains officers that escalation is de-escalation, meaning that you could escalate a situation with force, including deadly force, in order to diffuse it, an approach that places community members and the officers themselves at unnecessary risk. The police department not only instructs officers to be proactive in using projectiles, but has adopted a use it or lose it policy, taking the weapons away from officers who did not fire them enough. Second, we found that unhoused people in Phoenix have suffered a pattern of unconstitutional conduct. This finding is historic. This marks the first time that the Justice Department has found violations of the civil and constitutional rights of people who are homeless. Homelessness is a challenge in Phoenix and in many cities across the country. The homeless population in Phoenix has nearly tripled over the last decade. Over-policing of the homeless has become a central pillar of the police department's enforcement strategy. In fact, 37% of all of the department's misdemeanor arrests and citations were of homeless people. The criminalization of homelessness has no place in our society today. Based on our review, Phoenix's enforcement activities violate the rights of homeless people because police frequently stop, detain, and arrest the homeless without reasonable suspicion that they've committed any crime. In addition, the city and the police department seize and destroy the property of homeless people without providing adequate notice or a fair opportunity to collect their belongings. This behavior is not only unlawful, but it conveys a lack of respect for the humanity and dignity of some of the most vulnerable members of our society. Third, our investigation found that the police department discriminates against Black, Hispanic, and Native American people in its enforcement activities. Police officers have an obligation to enforce the law fairly and equally, but in Phoenix, officers are disproportionately targeting communities of color. For example, Black drivers in Phoenix are 144% more likely than white drivers to be arrested or cited for low-level moving violations, and Hispanic drivers are 40% more likely to be arrested or cited for the same thing. We also found that Phoenix police enforce drug and alcohol offenses more severely against Black, Hispanic, and Native American people than against white people. Data show that Phoenix cites and arrests Black people for marijuana possession at nearly 7 times the rate of white people. For Hispanic people, the rate is more than 3 times higher. And Native American people in Phoenix are 44 times more likely than white people to be cited or arrested for possessing or consuming an alcoholic beverage. Phoenix also disproportionately brings quality of life charges like trespassing, pedestrian traffic violations, and loitering against Black, Hispanic, and Native American people. For instance, per capita, Black, Hispanic, and Native American pedestrians were all more likely than white pedestrians to be cited or arrested simply for walking in the street when there is a sidewalk. The police department claims it was unaware of these significant racial disparities, but longstanding and frequently voiced community concerns about discriminatory policing, as well as overt displays of bias within the police force, should have spurred the department to analyze its own data. Instead, the police department turned a blind eye to the data, ignored these unmistakable warnings, and failed to uncover its own discriminatory policing patterns. Fourth, our investigation found that the Phoenix Police Department violates the rights of people engaged in protected speech, including retaliating against people who criticize the department. For example, following a protest at which officers unloaded canisters of tear gas on peaceful protesters, police department officers circulated a challenge coin, a memento normally used to commemorate moments of valor and pride during service. This challenge coin instead depicted a protester whom an officer shot in the groin with a 40mm impact round. When police officers abuse their power to silence people asserting their constitutional rights to free speech and assembly, it erodes the community's trust in law enforcement. Fifth, we found that the police department and the city discriminate against people with behavioral health disabilities, particularly when responding to calls for assistance. For example, 911 call takers too often fail to identify when callers have behavioral health issues and default to sending most of those calls to police officers. Phoenix's own experts estimate that on average each month, about 10% of Phoenix's dispatch calls for service relate to behavioral health. And our analysis found that officers spend significant patrol time responding to these calls. Even though resources are available for an alternative response, Phoenix directs only a small fraction of those calls to them, even when there is no violence, no weapon, no immediate threat, and no need for a police officer to immediately respond. Further, when sending behavioral health calls to the police, call takers often fail to pass on critical information that could help officers respond appropriately. Particularly in this area, the hair trigger tendency of Phoenix police to use indiscriminate, overwhelming force is both pronounced and harmful. We saw officers, including those with specialized training, quickly escalate encounters by using force, making arrests even when the police were on scene specifically to transport the person to behavioral health treatment. These harms could be eliminated by dispatching behavioral health responders where appropriate, and where a law enforcement response is needed, the harms could be mitigated by sending behavioral health responders together with police. Finally, we found that the police department makes no concession for the particular vulnerabilities of children, instead treating them just the same as adults. The problematic tactics and unlawful conduct of Phoenix police can significantly harm children's physical and mental well-being. Not only does such conduct harm children, but it can contribute to fear and distrust of law enforcement by the next generation of Phoenix residents. Our findings are not based on any one incident or event, but on a comprehensive investigation. Career attorneys in the Civil Rights Division conducted many hours of interviews. They participated in ride-alongs, reviewed thousands of documents, and watched hundreds of hours of body-worn camera video. Ultimately, our findings reveal evidence showing long-standing dysfunction at the Phoenix Police Department. The problems at their core reflect a lack of effective supervision, training, and accountability. To the city and police department's credit, during our investigation, they have taken preliminary steps to institute reform. Interim Chief Sullivan revised the department's use of force policy and introduced new training on de-escalation and the duty to intervene. The city has invested in additional shelters and resources for the city's homeless population. And the department has developed additional policies and training to guide 911 call takers in appropriately responding to requests for emergency assistance involving people with behavioral health disabilities. Recently, the city issued a Road to Reform report laying out what the city has done and intends to do in the future to achieve constitutional policing. However, today, many reforms have not yet been implemented. Other reforms exist on paper, but not in practice. In total, these efforts are simply not enough to address the full scope of our findings today. To achieve sustainable reform, we will need input from many sources: community members, patrol officers, command staff, and non-police emergency responders. Change is possible here. While the path to reform may not be quick or easy, through collaboration, partnership, and cleared-eye realism about the solutions that can achieve change, we can help to usher in a new chapter in Phoenix, one that creates lasting change and respects the civil and constitutional rights of the residents of Phoenix while promoting public safety. We appreciate that the city has committed to engage in continued conversation with the Department of Justice about next steps. As I close, I want to acknowledge that police officers have a difficult job and perform often unrecognized acts of heroism to keep the public safe. I also want to acknowledge the countless number of people in Phoenix who worked with us throughout our investigation, including community advocates and leaders and families of people subjected to deadly police force and police officers themselves. We know that sharing your thoughts and your experiences with us was not easy, but it made a difference. We look forward to continued engagement with the community in the months ahead. Phoenix residents deserve nothing less than fair, non-discriminatory, and constitutional policing. Our findings provide a blueprint and a roadmap to help transform the police department, restore community trust, and strengthen public safety efforts in one of America's largest cities. We're committed to working collaboratively with the police department, city officials, and the public to institute reform and to remedy the violations we identified in our investigation. An important task lies ahead, and we will persevere until we get the job done. Thank you.
At this time, we will take a few questions. If you have a question, please use the raise your hand function in Zoom. Please use your raise your hand function in Zoom so that I know that you would like to ask a question. I will take a moment to assemble the roster. Great. Our first question, I believe this comes from Luke at ABC. Please unmute your head.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this. I'm curious, do you anticipate any criminal charges being brought against any current or former city officials that have overseen the Phoenix Police Department, or any officers that were involved in any of the incidents that you outlined in the report?
Today's announcement is focused on our civil pattern and practice investigation into the police department. Any criminal work of the division is handled by a separate section, but today's announcement is focused on the results of our extensive and comprehensive civil investigation.
Great. Our next question, this is like Taylor with Arizona Republic. Please go ahead.
Hi, yes, thank you. I am wondering what the conversations have looked like between the Department of Justice and city officials regarding remedying this situation. What is your understanding of where the city's at, and where do you believe the public can expect the city to go from here?
City officials have committed to engaging in continued conversation with us throughout our recent history of undertaking work to address the need for policing reform across our country. We've had tremendous success working collaboratively with officials to identify the reforms necessary to address findings of violations, and we're hopeful that we'll have the same outcome here. We're committed to transparency and expect that the community and the public will have an important role in the process that lies ahead.
Thank you for that question. Next question, Sarah with Reuters.
Hi, thanks for doing this. I was hoping you could discuss a little bit why Phoenix didn't want to agree to enter into a consent decree the way Minneapolis and Louisville have. And also, just more broadly beyond just this, how quickly do you think you can get into entering into some of these consent decrees before the election? Because obviously, if you can't get some of these cities to agree to that and get it on the books, the work could potentially be erased if President Biden loses the election. Thanks.
Well, there's no one-size-fits-all approach to this very important work. We are indeed on a very productive path in Louisville and Minneapolis as we work to put in place a consent decree that will help ensure lasting and enduring reform in those jurisdictions. And we're very hopeful that we'll have similar success in Phoenix and build on that track record of work that we've done across the country. We approach this work with great urgency. We are making our findings public today and are prepared to roll up our sleeves and begin working with officials at both the city level and at the police department to identify a set of reforms that can fully address the harms set forth in our report.
Next question is Meg O'Connor with The Appeal.
Hi, good morning. The death you mentioned towards the beginning of this announcement was the death of 19-year-old Jacob Harris who police shot in the back, then sticked a dog on. I was wondering if you had any further findings that you can provide regarding the killing of Harris, the lack of discipline for the officers involved, and the incarceration of Harris's 3 friends for the killing that a police officer did.
That was a tragic death and tragic outcome. I will note that our report is focused on no one incident. We are focused here on a systemic problem. We identified patterns and practices of conduct spanning across several years and make clear the need for better policies, improved training, accountability mechanisms, and more. I will direct you to the final pages of our report, pages 119 through 125, which outline some of the remedial measures that we believe need to be undertaken to address the very serious problems uncovered in our report.
Next question, Jeremy Duda at Axios.
Hi, I just wanted to make clear, is the Department of Justice going to seek a consent decree with Phoenix, or is that undecided yet? Kind of what is the next step regarding that?
The next step is that we'll continue to engage with city officials. And our hope is that we will build on our track record of success in other jurisdictions and hopefully agree on a mutually acceptable set of reforms that can address the very severe findings of unconstitutional violations set forth in our report. Justice Department officials are on the ground now, and we are prepared to begin that work earnestly and swiftly.
So does that mean the Justice Department won't seek a consent decree, or is that not decided yet?
We do not have any announcement today, but a consent decree has been the vehicle that has helped to institute the reforms necessary to address the kind of serious violations set forth in this report today.
Next question, Jacques with AP. Go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to know, does the city plan to file anything today or in the coming weeks, any lawsuit, to press these allegations further right now? Or are you guys still in sort of negotiation stage?
We will undertake discussions in earnest with the city. Under federal law, we have the ability to negotiate a consent decree to put in place reforms that can address our violations. And if we're unsuccessful, litigation is another option available to the Justice Department to achieve relief. But we remain very hopeful that we can build on the track record of success that we have had in other jurisdictions across our country and put in place a consent decree that contains the strong medicine necessary to address the severe violations identified.
Next question, Jack Healy, New York Times.
Thanks. Can you just clarify the exact time period that you looked at police conduct throughout the course of this investigation? And why has it taken so long?
So we requested data from the city for a period that extends from 2016 through 2022. We also looked at data and information for the period of 2023 and 2024 as well. That included extensive interviews, review of documents, participating in ride-alongs, review of body-worn camera footage, and much, much more. Phoenix is the 5th largest city in our nation. This was a comprehensive investigation that exhaustively looked at a number of areas inside the police department. The report that we're producing today reflects extensive thought, care, and effort carried out by experienced career lawyers working with experts inside the Justice Department.
Next question is David with ABC15.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
So, breezing through this report as it's just been released, I've read the reports in Louisville, Minneapolis, and some others. On its face, this appears to be one of the more damning reports that your department has put together. Would you agree, based on the findings and the statements about there being very little oversight in many areas of this department?
The findings that we have issued are severe, and I will note that our finding with respect to the treatment of people who are homeless is historic. This is the first time that the Justice Department has issued a finding of this kind in a pattern and practice investigation. It's also only the second time that we have identified discrimination with respect to Native American people. But indeed, the findings are severe.
Christina Estes with Rio Radio.
Hey, thank you. The city's stance has been, we recognize we need to improve. We've made progress. We'll continue to do more. We don't need the federal government really breathing down our neck. We don't need the extra expense that's going to be involved in all of this court monitoring. We're certainly open to getting feedback, and we are continuing to do what we can to improve. So what would you say to that? Because there is a narrative out there that this is, the big bad government coming in, when Phoenix knows it has an issue and has been dealing with it and will continue to do so.
This is one instance where we can't count on the police to police themselves. While the city has undertaken some preliminary steps, our findings today reveal very significant and severe violations of federal law and the Constitution. We are prepared to do the hard work to address these reforms because the people of Phoenix deserve fair, non-discriminatory, and constitutional policing at the end of the day. I will point to our track record of success in cities like Seattle, Albuquerque, and Baltimore, where real reform and progress is underway.
Lauren Clark with Fox 10.
Hi, good morning. City officials have made very clear that they despise this concept of a consent decree. Do you foresee agreeing to some other type of agreement to implement these types of reforms?
We are prepared to sit down with officials and identify a mutually acceptable vehicle and path for addressing the very severe violations set forth in our report. A consent decree and an independent monitor, through our experience, have proven to be the kind of reform measures needed to ensure lasting and meaningful reform, which is what we want here, which is what the people of Phoenix deserve.
Last question, Brianna News.
Hi, when you were mentioning how the DOJ had findings of police throwing out homeless people's items and their overall treatment of homeless people, I was wondering if that was in reference to the zone and the city's handling of all the homeless encampments that cleaned up last year.
Yes, we have tracked very closely the city's actions in the zone. We know that the city closed the zone and has found shelter for many of the people living there. But we nonetheless saw illegal stops and property destruction continue outside the zone. And we know that more will need to be done to ensure that the police department changes its overall approach to policing homeless people and to ensure respect for the rights of people who are unhoused throughout the city. The criminalization of homelessness is not something that we can tolerate in our society today.
Thank you all for your time today. That is all the time that we have. Our press release and the report are public. If you have any follow-up questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Thank you.